Well, joining me now is Professor at the College of Public Policy at Hamad bin Khalifa University here in Doha, Sultan Barakat. Good to talk to you again. What is the expectation, do you think, of Gulf countries in these talks that are happening in Islamabad, and how optimistic do you think Gulf countries are that some kind of progress can be made?
Well, I think the level of optimism has now gone up a little bit, particularly when we see that Vice President Vance is leading the delegation. This is an important message for the Iranians, for the Gulf, but also for the Americans, I think, and the rest of the world, that now the regime for negotiation has moved out from the family circle of President Trump, who has come across in the last few weeks as totally unhinged with contradictory messages all the time, to the institutions of the United States. And to have the vice president there, I think, is important. It will restore some confidence amongst the Iranians, because before they've had 2 rounds of discussions that were dismissed in one way or the other. And it shows that the United States, unlike previous attempts, is now a little bit more serious. And that, of course, brings more hope in the area that the war at least will cease for now, and the Strait of Hormuz will open again. But I think in terms of long term and actual peace and stability in the region, the hopes are not as high still, because the elephant in the room, and in this case, the elephant outside the room, Israel, is still there. None of the issues that have instigated this war, and we all know that Netanyahu is the man behind this conflict, who convinced Trump to go to this war. None of those issues have yet have been addressed or even on the table. The genocide in Gaza, the attacks on Lebanon, the expansionist agenda of Israel, the settlements in the West Bank, all of this is what created the atmosphere that have charged Iran against Israel and vice versa. So without having comprehensive arrangements that bring Israel in line, here people are very, very concerned that we may see temporary ceasing of hostilities, but not permanent peace agreement.
And Sultan, you did mention there the Strait of Hormuz and the hopes that that could reopen. But what is a compromise that would be acceptable to Gulf states in terms of ships passing freely through? If Iran still insists on perhaps a toll of some kind or heavy payment in order to use the Strait of Hormuz, how would that go down here?
I think it's unacceptable to all the countries in the region, because it does feel as if Iran is holding them to ransom. They're practically going to block the Gulf in its entirety and insist on controlling who goes in and out. Having said that, I think there is a degree of understanding that after what they've been through, also it may be impossible to go back to what the circumstances were before. So something in between has got to emerge. I suspect a more detailed arrangement between Oman and, by extension, you could read the Gulf states and Iran has got to come along. It may include no tariff on Gulf ships or goods, maybe something on some of the international users of the Gulf oil, gas. There may be some restrictions on military use of the strait in the future, particularly the enemies of Iran and so on. So it's probably something that can still be talked about. But for now, people want the Iranians to announce publicly that movement has a degree of freedom, because, in fact, it's the ship owners and the insurance companies who are not directing their ships towards the Gulf, despite the fact that Iranians have been saying for a few days now, or even weeks, that we would allow some to cross. A public statement from the Iranians,
Sultan,
Sorry.
And Sultan, just finally, you get the feeling here in the Gulf that people are really questioning the whole objectives of the war after everything that's happened. How would you describe relations between the Gulf states and the United States right now?
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the coming few weeks. To start with, the original assumption that the United States is here to protect the Gulf states has proven false. The United States did not bother, nor did Israel bother with the countries where they've normalized relationships, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, to inform them in advance about their intention to attack Iran, despite the fact that everyone knew the consequences. The way Iran has reacted did not come as a surprise to people in the Gulf, because it's been in every single study about the potential security in the region. So there has been a degree of disappointment, but I think economically the economies are so tied together, despite the fact that the US keeps saying we are not reliant on the Strait of Hormuz, we don't need our ships to cross. Maybe directly, but indirectly, the economies are really integrated and interlinked. And the success of the Gulf is important for the successful economy in the United States.